Hello, my name is Gach Ram. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Intern for Central Community College. I've been assigned to bring you the Sustainability Leadership Workshops, the Building Series. Welcome, and thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to join us for the first workshop in the Building Series. The Building Series is designed as specialized workshops for educators within the building, design, and construction industries. However, the information provided today is for anyone who is interested in sustainable practices. Throughout the presentation, you can submit any questions through the chat box, which is located in the upper right-hand corner titled Chat. If you are interested in Hastings, or if you are in the Hastings campus live viewing room, you'll have the choice of using the microphone or the chat box. Also, as a friendly reminder, I would like to remind CCC faculty and staff to register for the EMPD sessions for this event. If you have any questions, please contact Corey Chaddock. Now, I am pleased to welcome today's presenter, Mr. Lane Burt. Lane Wesley Burt has a bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering from North Carolina State University and the University of Florida, respectively. He is a building engineer and longtime proponent of best-in-class technologies, strategies, and programs that maximize financial and environmental returns. Lane is a licensed professional engineer. After leaving engineering practice, he served as the policy director of the U.S. Green Building Council and as the federal energy efficiency lead for the Natural Resources Defense Council. In details of appliance efficiency to the big picture policy surrounding national energy and climate, Lane has advanced the best building science and the most innovative programs to reduce energy waste from the building sector. Lane is the managing principal of Ember Strategies, which he founded in 2013 in order to focus on advancing energy efficiency in the private sector. Lane is a well-known speaker on efficiency and has given keynotes and technical presentations at events in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Lane has provided numerous briefings and testimonies before congressional committees in the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives, as well as federal agencies. Lane is currently stationed in Melbourne, Australia, after being awarded the 2014 Fulbright Professional Scholar Grant in Climate Change and Clean Energy. Now, I will hand the microphone over to Lane Burt. Thank you, Lane, and all of you viewers for being with us today. Lane?
I appreciate the introduction. I am, in fact, in Melbourne, Australia. It is about 7:39 in the morning here on Friday, which is the perfect time to talk about green building. I put together, call it a LEED, a Living Building Challenge 101 presentation, and I hope that you find it helpful in understanding these programs, and perhaps it can provide some insight when you or one of your students is looking at potentially these programs or maybe working on a project that's participating. So today, we're definitely going to cover the basics of LEED and the Living Building Challenge. And to do that, I think it's best to start with the intent of the program. I found that understanding the intent of any tool, the why it is the way it is, really helps me better use the tool. And I think these green building tools are no exception to that. And if you understand the intent of the programs and of the individual credits, it's a lot easier to produce what you're going to be expected to produce, and you'll be better equipped to interpret and understand the requirements, and probably most importantly, minimize surprises, because surprises on any building construction project are generally not good. I'm also going to describe some symptoms of what successful project teams, some symptoms of successful project teams, what they do, what they look like, what they feel like. But we're not going to really get into the details of any individual credits or credit requirements or documentation. But I hope that after today, you'll be better equipped to dig into those things on your own and see what they're asking for and what they're after. So To start, before we talk about any green building program, best probably to start with just Green Building 101. What is it? If I were there in person, I'd probably ask you guys that question, solicit some answers, probably compare them. And when I've done that in the past, there's been a good deal of variation. People generally think, oh, well, yes, a green building, that's a good thing. It's a thing that I'd like to live and work in. I'd like to have a green building. And there tends to be some agreement about what are the basic attributes of a green building, like energy and water efficiency. But beyond that, variations tend to get pretty significant. So trying to do the next best thing, I couldn't be there in person, which is to go to the internet and ask Google. Google came back with a couple definitions that I thought were illustrative. I want to read them for you. This one is from Wikipedia, the first one that comes up. And it says, green building refers to a structure and using process that is environmentally responsible and resource efficient throughout a building's life cycle, siting to design, construction, operation, maintenance, renovation, and demolition. In other words, blah, blah, blah. And I will just say that, if you have to say in other words in your definition, you're probably not doing a good idea, or not doing a good job of defining that thing. And if you have a BS meter, that's probably going off right now. So maybe the second one here, maybe it does a better job. This is from Wiktionary. It says, a building designed to be ecologically correct by using resources efficiently, using internal recycling, renewable energy sources, recyclable or biodegradable construction materials, blending in with the local environment, particularly in out-of-town locations. The aims are to reduce to a minimum the environmental impact and to take human health factors into consideration. I will say that is better, but that still is a lot of synonyms and buzzwords for green put in front of synonyms for building. Maybe not the most clarifying concept for defining what a green building is. So that was the case when people decided they wanted to have green building certification. That was the problem. It was a hard to define concept. Everyone kind of wanted one. And if you've got something that people want and it's hard to define, there's a certain type of person who will pop up to try to sell you one. And these were kind of snake oil salesmen. So if there's a need out there like that, then it seems that some sort of real system would be demanded by the industry, and that was kind of what happened. Green building certification systems arose from the need to try and define, in practice, a hard-to-define concept and to provide the best in the building, design, and construction industry with an ability to prove it. So with a real definition and a real system, you can make statements and you can stand by them. And if you're one of the more advanced practitioners in building design and construction industry, you feel like you can design and build green buildings. You want to be able to back those claims up. You don't want everyone to be able to say that, yes, this is green. Of course it's a green building. And the certification angle comes because if you want to be able to say those things and to prove it, you need some verifier, some credible third party that can make what you say hold water, to make it have weight. So if that was the problem and that was the need, what does the building design and construction industry want from green building certification today, and are they getting it? They want to define what a green building is, like I said, in practice. They want to provide the industry with a usable voluntary process for documenting their efforts and achievement. And voluntary is highlighted because if it's a leadership distinction, if it's a mark of accomplishment, then if everyone has it, it does not have much meaning. And they want to credibly verify to the extent possible that the project, and by extension, the project team and the individuals working on a building, has done what was asked of it. So are the programs today doing that? Well, I think so, and that brings us to LEED and the Living Building Challenge. They are very clearly attempts to provide that to the industry, provide that value that the industry is looking for. Certainly they're not perfect. Interestingly, they're very different in what they set out to accomplish, and like I said, I'll talk a bit more about the intent. Some people do get confused because they don't really compete, and we'll get more into that. In practice, I think each will accomplish a lot more because of the existence of the others. So I'm going to talk about LEED first. I'm going to pause for questions before we shift to the Living Building Challenge. If you have urgent questions, use the chat function, and I'll be notified about it, and we can deal with those in real time. And then we will shift to the Living Building Challenge. So first, to start with, LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, LEED. It was created as a concept to be a mark of distinction targeting among the best on the market. And this isn't well defined, but just, I think, roughly the best quarter. It's built, it's not built so that everyone can do it, because like I said, if everyone can do something, it doesn't necessarily have as much meaning. The idea behind it was that if you're going to be a LEED building, which is going to be the basic definition of a green building, then there's certain minimum things you should do. You should have some minimum levels of energy and water efficiency, for example. And those are called prerequisites. Those are things that every project that comes through the program is going to have. But the system was meant to be flexible, so projects can go above and beyond those minimum prerequisites, and to the extent that they do, and depending on what they do and how difficult it is and how much environmental impact it has, you'll pursue these credits, as they're called, and those credits are assigned point values. You don't just have to do it, you also have to prove that you did it, and this is where that credibility factor comes in. If you can prove that you've done enough of the things that are laid out in the rating system, you get enough points and you'll be awarded the certification. So the certifications come in 4 different flavors or tiers or levels of achievement, starting with certified, which is a basic level, and that means you've gotten all the prerequisites and 40 of the additional points that are associated with the credits, and we will get into more detail on those. Moving up, if you get 50 and 60, you move to the silver and gold level, and these are all out of 110 points. And there's a big jump from gold to platinum, and you often hear LEED Platinum thrown around as a goal and really a mark of distinction, and it's intended to be. It's meant to be for the best of the best. So it's not just that LEED rolled a definition of a green building rating system out there and everyone agreed and started using it. Actually, because green buildings were so hard to define, there is a system for defining them. There's a lot of work that goes into each and every prerequisite and each and every credit. The theory behind that is if they set up a process for defining a green building, it will have much more buy-in from the industry. And in fact, the folks in the industry are the ones that are best suited to decide what is best practice and what is worthy of a point or a credit for this leadership distinction. So LEED development is a very deliberate process, and to try to make sure that the most well-qualified people were the ones deciding what a green building would be, they set up committees of practitioners and implementers and users. They decide what changes should be made to the rating system and propose them. The other theory behind what would make a good green building rating system is that it should be generally consensus-based, that most people should agree that, yes, this is a green building, this is worthy of a leadership distinction. And so after those committees of practitioners decide decide what should be in the rating system or propose changes, then there's a vote. And if most everyone agree, and again, most everyone, not necessarily unanimously everyone agrees, then that rating system or that change is approved. The other key tenet is that more difficult, more expensive, or more environmentally impactful actions should be rewarded more heavily. That's why there's credits with different point values associated. So there's a credit weighting process to make sure that the hard things get more heavily rewarded. And finally, because the system encourages people to be the best and targets that top 25%, the rating system has to change over time, because it's not that what is the best is not the same over time. Buildings get better, the industry learns how to do more, and then the codes change to require minimums that are different than what they did before. So the idea was the system should update regularly to make sure that only the best buildings are getting certified. We're actually in the midst of one of those transitions right now with LEED in the transition from LEED 2009 to version 4. And it's an interesting time. This has happened before. The first version of the rating system was 1.0. It went to 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2. So LEED 2009, which is like LEED version 3, is actually the 5th version of the rating system. And now this LEED version 4 is out and usable, and it does ask a good bit more of project teams and a good bit more of buildings before it will recognize them as green buildings. And then soon enough, I think the date is October 2016, LEED 2009 will go away, and everyone will be using the new version of LEED. And I'll talk a bit about both systems. So why change it over time? Why, if you have a product and people are starting to like it and use it, suddenly make it harder for them? That's not a good business model. But that's not the point of green building. The point of green building is to change the way buildings are built, designed, and operated for environmental benefit. And to do that, you have to keep encouraging the best of the best, the market leaders, to get better. So this graphic is from the U.S. Green Building Council. This is how they see themselves impacting the market. There's on the far right in blue, there's 5% the leading edge innovators, and then following them a green 20% market leaders, and this is the 25% that LEED is targeting. They're trying to help them get attention to their projects. They're trying to help them gain a competitive advantage, and they're trying to help them to innovate. Following that top 25% is most building projects, 70% using somewhere between what is mandatory minimum in code and up to the point that could be LEED buildings. So that's most projects. And then, of course, there are a few buildings out there that don't actually meet code. So those are below the bar. Those are actually breaking the law. But LEED sees, as the codes change and as LEED improves over time, this entire curve should shift to the right, and that's why they call it market transformation. So what do you actually do to get the plaque? We talked a bit about how all the work behind the plaque, but what do you do to get it? So I'm going to switch to some of USGBC's slides so that you can see how they talk about what they do and got to get a sense of how they describe their efforts. So first, they define the broad categories within green building that they'd like to reward, and then they convert them into groups of things that you can do, which are called the credits, and they group those credits into credit categories. They're sort of shorthand. We could call them energy, water, site and location, indoor environmental quality and health, and material use. And those are the five colored blocks you see on the screen there. I do apologize if the letters are hard to read. But those are the basic fundamentals of how LEED is defining a green building. These are the building blocks. So within each of those building blocks, there are individual credits where you are asked to do something more and to prove it on your building project. So it's important to remember that because of the consensus process and because of the committees, that in each credit category and in each credit, there's been a debate, maybe even a controversy among green building industry practitioners about where to set the bar and what is good enough and what is sufficient for rewarding. So behind each credit, there's a story. So if you take all the different credits and you look at the points assigned to them in the different credit categories, for LEED 2009 in this example, this is what you get. USGBC has put this in the form of a nutrition label deliberately because they think that that's how the LEED scorecards, the achievements should be interpreted, that these are sort of the basic ingredients of a green building. And it is worth looking into what a building project has done. This is sort of the transparency and accountability aspect that I mentioned previously. So the credit categories are the ones that I mentioned. They're termed a little different. There's sustainable sites, which is about how the building impacts the location around it and interfaces with it. There's water efficiency, energy, and atmosphere, which is where all the energy efficiency credits are. Also refrigerant management and other things that impact the climate. Materials and resources, indoor environmental quality. Those sum up to 100 points, and you can see that energy has the most share in the 2009, which continues in version 4. And there's also 10 sort of wild card points, and that's why the total is out of 110 and not 100. There are 6 points out there for innovation, which might be something totally new that you've done on your building project that maybe should be a LEED credit but isn't. Or maybe you've done so much of one of the things, like you've gone above and beyond in energy or water efficiency, then you can submit for an innovation point. There's also regional priority credits. There's 4 of them out there, and that's for things that are particularly important in your location, like water efficiency, say, in Arizona. So if you were going to define a green building, come up with credits and points, and basically make a rating system, and then apply it to all the different types of building projects out there, you find that it would be very difficult. There'd be lots of situations where your rating system doesn't work exactly right for different types of projects. So as a result, there's a few different flavors of LEED. Most of the examples that I'm going to refer to are going to refer to commercial construction and predominantly to the new construction rating system, which is what you see on the left-hand side of this diagram in orange. That covers most of what you consider a building design and construction process, from the design drawings to the actual construction of the building to the certificate of occupancy being issued. That's new construction and renovations. And those are substantial renovations rating system. Now, that's the one that most people use for new construction. There are some specific flavors of that rating system: schools, healthcare, retail, and again, that's just because there's unique considerations in these projects. They need a bit more customization. There's also 2 complementary rating systems called commercial interiors and core and shell. And these are basically pieces of the new construction rating system, because sometimes you build a building and you don't know what's going to go into it. You don't know exactly who's going to occupy it. That's a core and shell building. And then sometimes, on the other hand, you're building out or fitting out a building that's already been built, and you're fitting out a piece of it. And that's the commercial interiors rating system. There is also a LEED for Neighborhood Development Program and a LEED for Homes program. And these for all design and construction rating systems. They're an assessment of the design and construction teams and really an assessment of the green potential of the building. The existing buildings and operations, existing buildings or LEED or LEED O&M, operations and maintenance, is the system that looks at the actual performance of a building, the energy and water use, and it's more an assessment of realized potential. So why so many? Might seem like a lot. Well, the system is voluntary and people only use it to the extent that they find it useful. And we'd always ask you to do better, but it can only ask you to do better on the things that is within your power to do better on. So as a result, there's more rating systems that reflect the way the market works in practice. When you ask people to do better, it has to be on the things that are within their control. Okay, so if you're going to build a project, you're going to decide to build the LEED project, what does that look like? What does the process look like? Well, first you look at the project and figure out which rating system makes sense for that project, which is the ones that I just showed you. And generally you only have one choice. You clearly fit in one bin or another, but you identify which rating system makes the most sense. You register your intent with US GBC, which gives you access to the online system. You decide yourself as a project team what your green building strategy is going to be, which credits and which points you're going to go after.
Excuse me, Wayne. We got a little bit of feedback that the audio is coming in very softly. If you could, yeah, try that. And
keep the mic closer.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So once you figure out which rating system you should be using, you register your project. That gives you access to the online system. You decide as a project team what your green building strategy is, which credits and points you're going to go for, and then you follow the guidelines that are out there for those credits, and you produce the material that you're asked to produce to prove it, and you put that all into an online system called LEED Online, and you press submit. From that point, an entity called the Green Building Certification Institute actually reviews your submission, looks and sees if what you've done is sufficient to prove that you've actually attained the intent of the credit. And then if you've got enough points when they do this, then you will be awarded the certification. So GBCI is the sister organization of US GBC. The US Green Building Council writes the rules, but the Green Building Certification Institute does the certification. So lots of people have been doing this. It's a pretty popular process at this point. This is just certification in square footage over the years. You can see it kind of exploded in 2009. And interestingly, gold certification started to outpace certified and silver certifications, which most people interpret as meaning it's time to raise the bar in the rating system and get back to targeting that top 25%, and hence the process and the transition to V4 that I mentioned before. So what does the rating system ask you to do? I'm going to stay at a decently high level, and I'm going to talk both about 2009 and V4. In 2009, each of those credit categories that I mentioned, 5, is represented explicitly. There's some changes in the next version. But you have sustainable sites, energy and atmosphere, water efficiency, indoor environmental quality, materials and resources. So sustainable sites is a collection of things that you're asked to do, with the theory being that you're reducing the impact of the site on the area around it. Energy and atmosphere is all about energy efficiency and to a lesser extent, refrigerant management and renewable energy. But to get a lot of those credits, you just beat the energy code. In most places, that energy code is ASHRAE 90.1, and you beat it by as much as possible. For water efficiency, very much the same concept. You minimize indoor and outdoor water use, and you beat the benchmark by as much as you can. For indoor environmental quality, this is a collection of pretty varied credits, but the idea is that you design around the people in the building, which means that you ventilate, you give them control, you make them comfortable, you think about the lighting and the mechanical systems and how they impact that environmental quality. And finally, just to drastically oversimplify materials and resources, just you're trying to use as much of the best stuff on the market as possible, and you're trying to look at the total amount of materials in the site and how much of the best stuff you've used. So now to shift a little bit and get a little bit more in depth on V4, since that's the new system and the system that people will increasingly need to become familiar with, because it's, like I said, it's out now. Certifications, buildings have been certified under V4, but you can still use 2009 up until the end of 2016, or at least October. One note that, this is, you saw that growth. That means the system's gotten a lot more popular. That also means that the development of the rating system has a lot more participants. So when you've got more cooks in the kitchen, it's much more difficult to get the food on the plate. And it's quite impressive that now this system has gotten through that process and is out and available for use. It's met the definition of consensus. So what does it say? Well, the scorecard, if you were to look at it side by side with the old scorecard and the old points, you'd see some changes, but generally would look very similar. Excuse me. There's been a lot of reorganizing and combining and some introduction of new stuff, along with asking people to do a bit more. One of the first changes is this integrated process credit, which you see up at the top, and I'll talk more about what an integrated process is in a bit. But if you do it, you get a point, and that doesn't really apply to any particular category. The site category has been split up into location and transportation, as well as sustainable sites, and that's just to give it more clarity and to have a greater priority on the location and transportation aspects. The types of things you're asked to do there are take care of the land that's on the site that happens to be sensitive, or you get credit if you're building on a high priority site for building. It looks at the density of the area around you in terms of buildings and the amount of people, and makes sure that you're matching it. It talks about access to transit and bicycle facilities, reducing your parking footprint, and encouraging the use of green vehicles. And in each one of these credits, there's different requirements and different pieces of documentation that you're asked to produce. In the sustainable sites category, it's similar to what it was previously, where it's about your impact on the site while you're building. So that means that you're protecting or restoring habitat, that you're preserving open space to the extent that there is some and there's a need for some, you're managing the rainwater, your impact on the heat island, and the light pollution that you're generating. Water efficiency is still fairly straightforward, like I was saying. You minimize your indoor and outdoor water use, which is pretty simple if you spend the time to think about it at the design phase. But there's also now more points for using better water meters and more water meters at different levels of the building. And for the first time, cooling tower water use is considered. If you spend some effort minimizing that, you can get credit. Excuse me. The energy and atmosphere credit is still fundamentally about energy efficiency. Beat the energy code by as much as you can. But there's also points for commissioning, for more metering, for participating in demand response programs, and then to the extent that you have green power, which means renewable energy, solar on site, or sometimes biogas and other technologies, your percent of your power that you generate gets you credit, and you can purchase green power from your utility as another avenue. Within materials, like I said, it's used as much of the best stuff on the market. In the new rating system, there's just different definitions for what is the best stuff and how to calculate that. Also managing your construction demolition waste and minimizing that to the extent that you can, keeping things out of landfills. indoor environmental quality, the types of things they ask for. Like I mentioned, you've got to ventilate at least to a minimum, but the more that you do on ventilation, thermal comfort, control, daylighting and views, and the interior lighting control and acoustic performance, the more you can do to make the building a pleasant place to live or work, the more points you're going to get. And that's 100 to that point. There still are the 10 wild cards, the innovation points, and then the regional priority points. So the tiers that I showed you, the certified, silver, gold, platinum, that's all still the same. So now you've kind of seen how a rating system can change. Why should it change? Why would we want it to change? And this is important as we shift to talk about Living Building Challenge, because this is where the intent of programs is quite different. So the U.S. Green Building Council thinks that as people use the rating system and they get better at things, then they will put out a new rating system that will ask for better environmental impacts or less negative environmental impacts, which is the scale you see on the far left from on the vertical axis, going from negative environmental impacts to positive environmental impacts. As you go up, somewhere there's a line for zero impact. And right now, LEED buildings, even though they are green buildings, are still having negative environmental impacts. But with every version of the rating system, they'll have less until eventually they start to have none and start to have positive environmental impact. And that's why you see these tiers of certified silver, gold, and platinum moving up over time. And time is the horizontal axis. I like this chart because I think it alleviates some of the confusion about, okay, well, what's LEED and what's a green building versus what are the codes? And now you have more confusion because we have green codes. This shows the codes. That's the big gray block increasing over time, which means reducing negative environmental impact. So the codes are actually getting better and getting greener. And there's that green sliver in the middle, and that's because there are now green building codes, like I mentioned, the International Green Construction Code, IGCC, and ASHRAE Standard 189. And that's because LEED is a leadership program, a voluntary program. It's not meant to be a code. So if you want to require some of the things that LEED buildings do, you'll need a code for that, and that is what those products roughly do. But I think this chart shows it well, and I agree that eventually the green codes don't stop being a separate thing, and all codes just start to require the things that obviously should be done to build better buildings over time. I just can't think of any good reason why we want to continue to separate the green building practice from just best building practice in the future. And I think this shows a convergence at some point, which hopefully will be the case. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk about working with LEED and being on a LEED project team and what makes them successful. But first, I want to reemphasize the intent question that I highlighted at the very beginning. If you remember the intent of the rating system, of the credit, and really of the certification itself, it will help you prepare and minimize surprises. The rating system is targeting among the best projects in the world. Remember, each credit is meant to be a meaningful step above standard practice. It's not supposed to be the same thing that is done on every project. And remember, you are going to be asked to prove it. So keep more records when you're in a LEED project. This is going to be reviewed and certified, and it's easier just to keep that in mind the entire time and not be surprised. So say you're working on a LEED project and you're part of a project team, say at the design phase, but also could be at the construction phase. You're either working with the architects or the engineers, or you're working with the contractors and subcontractors. What do successful project teams tend to do? Well, the ones that do well tend to start early. They say at the very beginning of the project, this is going to be a LEED project, and therefore we know we're going to be going above and beyond, and we're going to communicate. We're going to make sure these things get done. This is where that integrated design comes in, and that generally means you have all members of the design team on board early, so that the architects do talk to the engineers, especially the mechanical engineers and electrical engineers doing the lighting, and that decisions made early don't hamper the team as they try to design a green building later on. And the same is really true for the design team and the construction team. The construction team, whether the general contractor, the mechanical contractor, the electrical contractor, they need to be in the loop as well, because they're going to be installing and really field engineering these systems to make them work. And if their input isn't reflected early, then sometimes the building designs can be very complicated, and confusion can happen, and sometimes points can be lost in the process. You're also going to very clearly need to articulate roles and responsibilities, especially with respect to the documentation. Like I said, you are going to be asked to prove it, and if you're not clear about what's going to be produced to prove it, when it's going to be produced, it's pretty easy in a construction process for this to get lost. Getting the project done and getting off the job site is going to be the priority. That's just the reality. But if you define the roles and responsibilities early, you can help avoid that sort of confusion. The other thing you can do is to have a cohesive strategy from the start, and if you know the connections between the credits, you can minimize all the extra work you're doing, because it's just the core of what you're doing. So for example, if you're going to prioritize energy efficiency, which is both a prerequisite and a credit, and it's the credit that gets you the most points if you do it well, and you have all of your design team and your construction team on board with doing it that way, you can start to add a lot of credits after that one that are related, and start to produce the similar documentation for each. So your mechanical design is going to not only cover the energy efficiency along with the lighting design and physical building systems, but your ventilation, which is related, your daylighting and thermal comfort, your refrigerant management, refrigerant use in the mechanical systems, your outdoor air monitoring, your controllability of the lights and the temperature. These are all things that can be sort of add-ons to the fundamental energy efficiency strategy. And the more you do those things, the more points, if you have renewable energy, that you'll get through the renewable energy credits, which is EA Credit 2 and EA Credit 6. That's on the design side, but then if you follow through with documentation, and then in the construction side, do the proper commissioning of those same systems, and you actually write up a measurement and verification program to communicate how are these things supposed to work to the owner, you can get additional points. And again, these are for doing the same things, but documenting them thoroughly and making sure that you've built out your building plan along with what the credits are asking. This touches 4 prerequisites and 43 potential LEED points, which is a certified 2009 points, which is a certified building on its own. And each piece of the documentation is connected. So if you know you're going to pursue those things, you can make sure that your documents are sufficient for a variety of the credits. And this is how your strategy can lead to less work than if you sort of do it piecemeal. And this is how getting started can help you save time. I should say this is also this strategy piece and this project managing piece among the different teams on a building and design and construction project is why some projects opt to hire a specific consultant to help them with the LEED process, a LEED consultant, because of course all the other design team members and the other construction team members have other priorities. Like I said, getting done, getting off the job site is going to be priority. But with someone who's dedicated, who's assigned in a dedicated way to track this stuff, it really helps those team members not have something fall through the cracks, because it is sometimes difficult. So say you're on a design team and you're charged with doing an individual credit as opposed to just being on a successful design team. What would you want to try to do? What would be your strategy to make sure that you get the credits you're assigned? Well, you want to be very familiar with the credit, what it asks for, and especially what you're asked to produce to prove it. The more time you spend understanding that, the less time you'll spend putting it together because you won't make mistakes. You want to start on the documentation early, even on an individual credit, even if the project team doesn't start early. You don't want the timing to surprise you or to get to a time crunch later in the project and have your ability to deliver compromise. You also want to know what could happen on the job site or in the design process that potentially would be impactful on the credits that you've been assigned to champion. You don't want to let them get you. You don't want to miss some piece of documentation that you were supposed to get, but you weren't in charge of producing explicitly. It can happen. The solution to that is just to over-communicate, ask for everything early and often, and don't understand that the other folks that you're talking to know exactly what you're talking to. Show them the form and be very specific. Don't let it impact your ability to deliver. And then finally, when it comes to your documentation, don't be sloppy. Just like any other sort of review or any other test, you want to project and you want to project competence. Sloppy documentation might mean a sloppy project, and I know if I were a reviewer, that would make me ask more questions. So knowing the documentation and putting it together, making it look good, consistent, simple, easy to interpret, that's gonna help you in your LEED submission. So a few more tips for design teams. I mentioned strategy for getting points, but within your strategy, make sure you mind the prerequisites. If you lose a point here or there, that does happen. You can sometimes make it up with a point in another place, but you lose a prerequisite and you're just out of the program. And as you saw in my example, energy efficiency is going to be the heart of any successful LEED project. There are other ways to do it, but this is the most straightforward way. And that energy model that you use to prove your LEED, your energy efficiency points, is actually used for documentation in a lot of other credits. So make sure that your energy modeler, whether it's someone specific or maybe it's your mechanical engineer, is a pretty good communicator and actually get the information there that is required of them from other parties. There are prescriptive ways to do the energy efficiency credits as well if you don't want to do modeling, but most bigger projects end up doing modeling. As I mentioned, you don't just start on thinking about LEED early, but you actually start to fill things into the documentation early. Because the way these documents are designed, they're meant to also be useful for you in your specific job process. So if you're an engineer, these documents are meant to mirror your sizing documentation and then your energy use estimation documentation. So if you use them in your process, if you use the form, you'll save yourself time in duplicating the information gathering and the data entry. And then sometimes project teams wait until the project is finished and then say, okay, everybody put your documentation in, and they don't do it as an ongoing process, and that's really just asking for it. Of course, it can be done, but it's very risky. Things do fall through the cracks. So I've referred to documentation several times. What is it? Well, here are some examples, not getting too detailed. Sometimes if you're using an energy model to prove your energy efficiency, you're going to need the input reports, which come from the model. It just shows all the things you put into that model, your different lighting inputs, your different physical material inputs, and the R values and U values, and the design, the mechanical system efficiencies and how many units there are, where are the units. This is part of prerequisite and a credit, and then of course there's the output report, which is how much energy your project is estimated to use in a year. in terms of total cost, and then how much energy the code baseline is projected to use in a year of total cost. And the difference is your energy, the number of points you'll get through the EA credit 1, the energy efficiency credit. You also have to produce a lot of floor plans that show key features, and these can be, one plan can show a lot of different things, but the types of things you're asked to show. Sometimes your occupancy definitions, sometimes your thermal comfort conditions, sometimes where the negatively pressurized rooms are, if there's chemical rooms or other things like that, where your sensor locations are, your CO2, your outdoor air monitors. Sometimes you need your submittal docs. So you say the material is compliant. They're not going to go check on the site, but if they want to, okay, what did you put in? So here's what we spec'd, and it meets the intent of the credit. Unfortunately, there are some specialized spreadsheets that you do have to do, which is additional time, additional work, and those are often in the forms themselves. You have to put in, say, this air handler or this rooftop unit, and what zones it serves, what rooms it serves, and sometimes, how much air, what are the set points. So you just can't get away from some of that. People always ask about cost, so here it is. This, I know you can't read it, so don't bother, but this is the actual cost from GBCI's website for registering and certifying a building. So just to highlight some of the maximum numbers here, the most you could pay for registration is $1,200. Most buildings are going to pay somewhere, are going to pay a maximum of 5.5 cents per square foot for certification. Really big buildings will pay $27,500. So I highlight these because in the context of a big building project, these are not big numbers. These are rounding errors. But that's not necessarily what people talk about when they're talking about costs of green building. These are just the registration and certifications costs. The real costs associated with the green building are in the time that it's required, the additional design or engineering or construction effort to actually achieve what the credit asked you to achieve. And potentially that separate lead consultant that I mentioned. These costs can be significant, but they're highly dependent on the project strategy for achieving LEED and how familiar members of the team are with what they'll be asked to do. So the cost tends to go down with the learning curve. And there are some buildings out there that do LEED at no additional cost. Which credits you choose to pursue can also have a cost consideration. The two that are talked about the most are the energy efficiency credit, which is a lot of points. It might require extra engineering, but if your engineering team is good at it, and maybe it won't. But the modeling and documentation, if you weren't planning to do it before, is an additional cost. Now, of course, you might get energy savings over the life of the building as a result of more efficient design, and you should take that into consideration. Another credit that has additional costs is the commissioning credits, which if you weren't planning to do them are just an extra cost, but that's an investment to make sure that the building owner gets what they paid for and that the building is turned over operating as it was designed to operate and doesn't have systems that are just improper and not ready to be part of the building. If you have more questions on costs, LEEDuser.com is an excellent resource for all sorts of LEED credit questions, and they did an excellent report on the cost of LEED that can help you to figure out what the totals will be, or at least what the ranges will be if you're on the fence about doing a green building certification system. So if that's what you do on a project team, and that's what a LEED building is, and that's how a LEED building is defined, and you've done all this work, and now you've got the certification, why did you do that? Why do you want that? And I think it's helpful to think about LEED certifications, especially for design and construction, like degrees. Once you get that plaque, it's just like when you get that degree. It's a helpful analogy. It does actually hold up on several levels. If you're a student and you get a degree, you back up your claim to be confident in the fundamentals of what you studied. If you're a building and you claim to be green and you have a certification, being green is your curriculum, and you can back up your claims. Potentially, you could even graduate with honors, which would be a higher level certification, gold or platinum. Just because you get a degree and you go out into the job market, you're not guaranteed the job, but you have a competitive advantage in finding one because you have that degree. That's pretty similar for a building coming out of design and construction to get the certificate of occupancy. That job is like a sale to a new owner, or potentially leasing up the building to tenants and moving to the money-making part of the building life cycle. So the buildings that have the certifications might have a competitive advantage in doing those things. And then on the other side, just because you have a degree, your employer doesn't get a guarantee that you're going to be among the best employees. And similarly, just because you have a building with a certification, that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be a high performer. It means that you've gone through a program that's meant to maximize your chances of success. So a high-performing green building actually does use less water and use less energy and produce less waste. It's not guaranteed. It still has to be achieved in reality. So to take the analogy a bit further, I showed you the different flavors of the rating system. The ones on the left are design and construction. These are like degrees. These are an assessment of the potential. Whereas on the other side, these are more like your actual job performance or a professional award because it's based on actual data. For existing building side, that means energy and water use data, actually living up to your potential. So this is a pause point. If LEED certification is like a degree, then what is the Living Building Challenge and why do we need it? And I'll spend a little less time on Living Building Challenge, but I want to just pause here for any questions folks might have on LEED.
Okay, I've unmuted all the sites. If you are not live in the Hastings viewing room, you're going to have to submit it through the chat box and then I'll read it to Lane. If you are in the Hastings viewing room, then you can use the microphone and ask your questions. I'm just going to keep everyone unmuted while it usually takes a few minutes for everyone to figure out what they're going to ask. But
and there will be more time for questions after we cover living buildings. So if you have a broader question, it's okay to hold it.
So one question we received through the chat box is, in regards to operations and maintenance, why does it only cover half of those degree areas that you talked about on the slide? Yeah, this slide.
Well, I think it's more that the existing building operation and maintenance system, the LEED system there, is actually, it's broader in what it can cover than the design and construction rating systems. They have to be more specialized because there's a lot more different ways that buildings get designed and produced. So lots of different buildings can use the same rating system for existing buildings. There is a key limitation in that some of the tools that are used by the existing building rating systems to rate performance, specifically the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool, there are specific limitations about what building types can use that tool. Because LEED is not necessarily a standard itself, it's a collection of standards and other programs. So it tends to rely on what's already out in the market and use the tools that are out there to evaluate performance or potential. So there are some real limitations to what existing building types can use LEED for EB, and that's a technical problem.
So that, for clarification, Lane, the operation and maintenance isn't available for homes? Is that what that graph is saying there, and then what you just... Okay.
That's true.
Or neighborhoods or commercial
is only
interiors.
available for commercial buildings. That's right.
But not commercial interiors?
No, it's whole building only. Right.
Yeah, okay. I see. Thank you for the clarification. Mark, does anyone on your site have questions before he moves on?
No, it looks like we're okay right here.
Anyone else in here right now? We have one more coming. Just hang on.
Yeah, I have a question. Which version of the LEED system did you say we're going into from the 2009?
Right. So you can still use LEED for 2009 up until October 2016. And then it switches to V4. Now, version 4 is already available, and people are voluntarily deciding to use it. But after October 2016, you won't be able to register a project under LEED for 2009. Another important point is that you could find yourself working on a LEED 2009 project after 2016, because once you register, that's usually at the beginning of the project. So sometimes these projects take several years to move from the design phase to construction completion. So there will be understanding LEED 2009 will be useful for years from now, not just up until 2016. But if you kind of learn about one, you're going to want to learn about the other because both are going to be relevant for the near future.
Okay, I think we have one more. Now let's say Mike over here.
Hi, Lane. I've been looking into construction and demolition, reuse, and recycling as it relates to LEED points and certification. And from what I understand, LEED provides 1 point for 50% recycling rates, 2 points for 75% or more. I was wondering, from your experience, if you could just briefly speak on the feasibility of reaching these benchmarks, or do you have examples of waste recycling and reduction strategies that have qualified for LEED innovation points?
My expertise is more on the energy side, but I can say that yes, people are achieving those credits, and you can actually go and look up and find which buildings achieved those credits through USGBC has a website called the Green Building Information Gateway, and you could go and find projects near you that have achieved that particular credit, which is kind of a fun thing to do if you're interested in learning about how people really got this stuff done. I can also say that not having put those strategies together myself, so I can't comment on the best way to do them. When I'm on a job site, I do see different types of bins and just a different level of consideration to the waste on a LEED site compared to just a normal job site. Just a normal job site, you've got big dumpsters and everything's thrown in there. But on a LEED site, you've got specific bins for specific things, and people are looking at making sure it all stays sorted so that it can go to a place that will reuse it, and it can be collected, and they can keep their targets in line. So again, can't speak to it specifically, but it is having an effect, and the job sites just physically feel different. I can see evidence of change. And again, that website, if you wanted to check out who's done it, is the Green Building Information Gateway. It's gbig.org. And then also on LEED User, which I mentioned once before, there's specific strategies for attaining any particular credit, including that one. And USGBC actually provides access to some of their committee members who work in the industry and worked on writing the credits to answer the questions that people might have on the forums. So if you were to ask that question on the forum at LEED User, you'd get an answer, and not just from anybody. You'd most likely get an answer from someone who was on the committee that defined the credit itself.
Thank you, Wayne. Very, very helpful. And I'm going to let you take the mic 100% back now and continue moving on. You have 19 minutes.
Okay, that sounds about right. So if LEED is a degree and LEED for existing building is job performance or professional achievement, then what is the Living Building Challenge? Well, Living Building Challenge is a professional achievement. It's an assessment of success at what you do, but it defines success as if you are so successful that you never have to work another day in your life. This is the level of achievement that we're talking about with a Living Building Challenge building. So I want to go through the history of it quickly. It started in 2006 by Cascadia Green Building Council, which is the Pacific Northwest chapter of both the U.S. GBC and the Canada GBC. They cover Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. They formed an organization to run the certification, renamed it the Living Future Institute in 2011, and the first building was certified in 2010. So when I talk about what this is in the upcoming slides, I want you to know it right off the beginning. This has been done, and it can be done. They're up to the current version, which is 3.0, which was recently released last year. Okay, so what is the Living Building Challenge? Well, this is how the Living Future Institute sees itself. It's similar to that LEED chart that I showed you, where there's negative environmental impact, and we're trying to reduce it in green buildings now, and there's positive environmental impact, which eventually we think that all buildings should be having a positive impact. So the first dotted line you see on the left, that's kind of like a code building. The next two dotted lines moving to the right, negative environmental impact goes down, but it's still there, and that's kind of where green buildings are now, in between those two. The idea is that the Living Building Challenge is that you're going to start building either no negative environmental impact or more likely positive environmental impact building today. And if you can do that, you can be a living building. It is a definition of the ultimate success above and beyond anything in a LEED credit category. It's not targeting the top 20%. Forget the top 20%. It's not targeting best practice or even one particular innovative strategy. You have to have positive environmental impact, and you have to prove it, or you're not a living building. So what does that mean? Well, just picking some basic credits, and I'll show you the different credit categories in a minute. So for energy, that means you produce more energy than you use. You might be connected to the grid, but you are putting more in than you're taking out. For water, that also means that you produce more than you use. For waste, any waste you produce, you don't ship off. You're not just minimizing the waste. You're taking care of it on the site. It is processed in the building. And then on health, that means nothing in the building is going to have anything in it that's been shown to have a negative impact on people. And that's done through what's called a red list, which is a list of chemicals that you just don't have on the site. And that's a lot of work for project teams to figure out what's in building materials and make sure that none of those things are in them. So those are just examples. There's actually 7 petals to be a living building, and to be a living building, you have to have all 7. This is the very attractive plaque you see to the right. Those petals, which are like the credit categories in LEED and have a bunch of things they ask you to do, are energy, place, used to be called site. It's very much like the site category of LEED. Water, materials, health and happiness, again, like somewhat like the indoor environmental quality in LEED. And then there's also equity and beauty, which those are real things that you have to do in the Living Building Challenge, even though they are a bit more abstract. As I said, to be a living building, you have to do all 7. That means you don't get to do 6 or 7, and you don't get to do most of one of them. You have to be 100% in all 7. They did come up with sort of a half measure, because doing any of those petals, being net positive energy or net positive water or processing all your own waste, those are all really impressive accomplishments on their own. So they came up with what's called a PETAL certification, which is sort of the full living building certification. And if you get at least 3 of the petals, you can get what's called the PETAL certification. And one of those 3 has to be energy, water, or materials, because those are not just the toughest, I think those are probably the most transformative. If you get those, your other projects are very likely to learn from what you did and take some of those lessons. As I said, it's not based on an assessment of potential. The petals are awarded for demonstrating performance. That means you have to have at least 12 months of occupancy data before you can even submit. So you can't just be designed to be a living building challenge. You have to be functioning as a living building. There is also an on-site final review by a third party that's conducted to confirm it. And notably, that's not part of the LEED process. The fundamental commissioning and the commissioning credit in LEED are meant to be the on-site review in addition to the standard code compliance documentation and all the paper, the documentation that's uploaded to LEED online. So this program is extremely impressive. It's really the ultimate goal for green building. So I will mention the cost, even though it's not directly comparable, but just so you get a sense. Per petal, we're talking between 15 cents and 45 cents per square foot for a single-family home. And again, it does cover single-family homes. You can build those for living building. For commercial, institutional, or multifamily building, so a big building, you're talking $2,000 to $12,000 depending on size for each petal. And then finally, for really big buildings, you're talking 1 to 3 cents per square foot for each petal. So again, the same thing I said about LEED costs is true. It's not the registration and certification costs that are going to be the main drivers of cost here. And in particular, if you're working on a living building, which I should say for full clarity, I have not had the pleasure of doing. Of course, I'd love to. I've worked on many LEED projects, but not any living building projects. If you're on one of these project teams, cost is compared to what? I'm not sure what you would even benchmark yourself against. And interestingly, the total costs for the living buildings that are out there now are often talked about, and I've got a video about one that I hope we have time and hope it works. They'll address the cost question head on. The other thing I want to mention to draw back to the LEED discussion, LEED is meant to be consensus-based. Most people agree this is a green building. Living building is not meant to be consensus-based. This is the ultimate end goal. This is the very smart people in green building saying this is where we want to go and rolling out a very, very tall challenge and seeing who can reach that bar, really letting the designers and engineers and contractors really stretch. So probably the most impressive thing about living buildings is that they are real. There are some out there. This is the most recent data that I could find from the Living Future Institute. They are quantifying the number of projects at around 192, 5.3 million square feet, and you can see yes, that's increasing over time. That's what the lines mean. But where are they? Well, most of them are on the west coast of the U.S. and Canada, but you can see a scattering around both the Midwest and Mountain West and the East Coast as well. And it's not just in the U.S. and Canada, but there's some decent amount of living buildings in Australia, New Zealand, some in China, some in India, and a few in Europe. Most of those buildings, by physical buildings, are 27% are single or multifamily residential, 27% are mixed use, and 30% are education. In terms of square footage, over 50% are mixed use, about 20% are education, and about 10%, I think it's actually 11%, are commercial. So you can kind of get a sense of what is happening in these buildings. So they are, these aren't the big tall office buildings necessarily. So I wanted to highlight one actual building. This is the Bullitt Center. It's in Seattle, Washington. I haven't been able to go and see it, but I would like to. I'm going to find some excuse. It's going for a living building. It's the home of the Bullitt Foundation, which is an environmental foundation. They are in their performance period now, and they are 80% leased. So I could talk a bit about this building. It's incredibly impressive. It has positive net energy generation. It has positive energy water, positive water use, and probably most interestingly, it has its own digestive system. There's a series of connected composting toilets throughout a traditional office space, and the building actually digests and processes all its waste on the site. That big solar roof you see on the top is the solar roof and provides shade to the open park area that's in the front of it. So if it works, we have a short 2.5-minute video on this, and now would be the time if we can get it pulled up.
Okay, so last time we actually had I get stuck a little bit. So just for safety reasons, just because we're out of time and or close to the end of the time, I'm going to take any questions from any groups. We'll take questions again after the video if we still have time and nothing happens, but just for safety reasons. So, Mark, how's your group doing? Do they have questions for Lane?
No, it doesn't look like we have any here in Hastings at this time.
Okay, and then if anybody does have them, please put them in the chat box. We're gonna push this video, and what's gonna happen is it's gonna go directly to your computer, and after it's on your computer, I won't be able to control it. The only thing I'll be able to do is hopefully close it when it's done. So you can control volume, the size, all that, and in the meantime, feel free to put questions in. Everyone's gonna be muted while this goes. Okay, so everyone should have hopefully got to the end. If not, I did put the link in the chat box for you to save if you didn't get all the way to the end, and you can play it. This video is also being recorded and will be available on CCC's YouTube channel after we get it. It goes through production. Real quick, we do have another question that came in, and then we're also taking these moments to solicit any other questions. Okay, so the question that came into the chat box is, sorry, hang on one second.
I do have some resources on the slide on my screen. I'm not sure if you guys can still see it, but switch back. Maybe.
Yeah, let me give you share privileges again, Lane. Sorry about that, yes. My question seems to have disappeared, which is really strange. Never had that happen. Okay, here we go. How much is the additional cost of a living building compared to a traditional building? That was from a viewer, electronic viewer.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying, it's really hard to directly compare, but I know when I was watching that video that we just watched, and if I had watched it without those cost numbers, and you had asked me how much more per square foot would it have cost, I would have said 3 or 4 times as much. And it was only 25% premium to get the Living Building Challenge at the end of the day, which I think is, in context, quite shockingly low.
Okay, thank you. And we're taking any other questions. Lane, while we're waiting for questions, if you have any closing remarks, feel free to add them. You can also share your screen now if you want. No one can see your screen if you have any other things you want to show. If I've missed anybody's questions, please put it back in. Sometimes we get a lot of feeds related to audio and stuff, so sometimes I may miss an actual question.
Okay. I guess my closing thoughts is that I definitely encourage you to go to both livingfuture.org and usgbci.org and actually look through the rating system, especially the Living Building Challenge. Just reading through them really helps change the way you think about what you're asked to do on a building project. And then there are additional resources out there. I've mentioned LEED User and usgbc.org and livingfuture.org. There are more, but those are the places to start. I guess, I mean, to close, I have to point out that this is something to be proud of if you work in the building industry. There's not many industries that are out there that take on challenges this big on their own. I mean, the building industry isn't being told it has to do this. It's saying it is going to do this, and it's going to figure out how to do this in a voluntary and market-based way. I think that's something we can be happy about.
Great comments and thoughts, Lane. We really appreciate you coming and presenting live from Australia. Mark, this is your last call. Electronic viewers, this is your last call or questions.
Nothing in Hastings. Thank you.
Okay, we always put the videos up, and we usually get quite a few hits, so I'm expecting people will be watching that way too, Lane, so thank you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Gotch, and he's going to officially close our event.
All right, and once again, Lane, thank you very much for this presentation. It was very, very nice. And thank you to everyone else for joining us for the beginning of the building series. I'm glad that you joined us today. And again, Lane, thank you again for this wonderful presentation. Everyone, please visit the Sustainability Leadership Workshop page that just went up recently at www.cccned.edu/SLW for upcoming events. And to everyone, have a great Thursday. Thank you again for your participation, and we hope to see you at our next event.